You have also written about ways to support non-corporate media, independent media. You spoke about vouchers, and one of the points was copyright. How would that system you are proposing affect corporate media, particularly bigger corporations, and their patents?
Yeah, well, we have a situation in the United States where we're seeing, literally just a collapse of our traditional media, the newspapers, magazines, less so with television, but they're feeling this too. And an awful lot of that, well, two things. One is just the internet, so that you have material being distributed on the internet, and it's very hard for them to make money on that. So every newspaper has a website, but they tend to make much less from their website than they did from their traditional advertising in their print form. The other is just the power of Google and Facebook, that they could people want to advertise because they could have very directed ads in Google and Facebook. Whereas if you take out an ad in a newspaper, whether it's online or the print version, you're hitting a lot of people that have no interest whatsoever in your product. So they've lost a huge amount of ad revenue, and that is how, for the most part, they're supported. So as a result of that, you've seen massive layoffs. A number of many newspapers across the country, even some fairly large ones, have gone bankrupt. Those that haven't have almost invariably laid off a large share of their staff, their journalistic staff. So the question is, can you develop an alternative mechanism? And that's where my idea for voucher, tax credit, whatever you want to call it, comes in. So the logic here is that you would have individuals have a certain amount of money, say $100. I mean, that's arbitrary. It could be more, it could be less, but let's just start with $100. And they could give that either to an individual. So I know, and I have it beyond journalism. So it'd be writer, I say creative work more generally, because it's a problem for creative workers. It's not just journalists, it's also musicians. So copyright for music, that's, again, the amount of money for recorded music has just collapsed. So I could give my $100 to, person whose writing I like, a person whose music I like, whatever it might be. The condition of them getting the money is that they don't get copyright protection. So this again gets to the idea that that copyright or patents, that these are subsidies. These are the way the government pays for things. And the logic of this is, okay, we're going to pay you once, we won't pay you twice. So we'll pay you for, upfront. You could be in the system, and you'll get, the credits from whoever thinks your stuff's worthwhile. And there could be intermediaries, which I imagine most of it would go to intermediaries. So whoever thinks your work is worthwhile, and then your intermediary could be a newspaper, but then you don't also get copyright protection. So anyone who wants to could just copy it and send it all over the world, which I think for most writers, most artists, they would consider that a good thing. Someone once threatened me saying, well, what's wrong with me making copies of your book and selling them? I go, nothing. You want to do that? I mean, go ahead. So anyhow, you get the money once, not twice. But the point here is you could support a huge amount of journalism with this. So again, there's no guarantee. So people say, well, I want to write about X, Y, and Z. Well, maybe no one cares about X, Y, and Z. So that's unfortunate. You want to do that, no one wants to support you. But, my expectation would be is that most types of journalism that at least significant number of people value, that would be supported. And this is, a totally alternative mechanism. Now, I wouldn't arrest someone for staying in the current system. So what I envision is as a competitor. So if you have the traditional newspapers and they say, hey, we don't want any part of this, we're going to stick with our model, they're welcome to do so. The only downside for them is that you're going to have a lot of very good reporters opting for this new system, this voucher tax credit system, and their work is going to be available for free. So if I want to go into the Los Angeles Times, I have to pay them whatever amount of money to get on their website. Well, if on the other hand, there's Los Angeles News or whatever they call themselves, and they're in this alternative system, anyone who wants to could just go on their site any day of the week. So if the Los Angeles Times wants to continue with its current model, it's welcome to do so, and maybe they will. Maybe they'd be able to survive. But in any case, the point is you'd have an alternative which is likely to support a very large number of journalists. I should also add, because other people have jumped on this, that, oh, why don't we just give them money to newspapers? Well, that's both, I think, a philosophical and a practical problem. At a philosophical level, why, here's the Los Angeles Times to say, hey, we want to be in on this system. We'll change our model. Give us money. not individuals, have the government give them. Well, why? What gives them priority? So I want to set up a system, and I haven't had a newspaper, but I want to set one up, so I don't get it, but the Los Angeles Times gets it. Maybe my reporters will be better than theirs, but I'm not eligible. It's hard to argue that as a philosophical matter. What's the priority here? Why should they get priority? The other point is, as a political matter, we have this big issue in the United States that a lot of people, primarily on the right, fake news. That why would I give money to the Los Angeles Times? They're fake news. I mean, 90% what they say at the Times, the critics say, is nonsense. But whatever, they believe that. A lot of people believe that. So if you just say no, well, you don't have to give the money to LA Times. Here's $100. Give it to whoever you like, and some of that will go to horrible things. I mean, we have a lot of racist people in the country. They'll give it to racist publications. They'll give it to ones that distribute nonsense conspiracy theories. I don't think we could prevent that. But the point is, we could have that money used for supporting good journalism, which I think has to be the first priority.
But it would also, at some point, threaten the current model that is worth billions of dollars to Comcast and company.
I would expect it very much disrupt the current system, and, again, I don't have a lot of sympathy in the sense that if someone says, oh, we can't compete, you go, well, join it. We don't, copyright and patents both, they're public policies, and they're quite explicitly, it's kind of funny because I often have arguments with people and they go, oh, they're in the Constitution. I said, go read the Constitution. They're quite explicitly public policies to promote the arts and sciences. And if they aren't doing a good job, if we don't think the current patent system is doing that in a good way, if we don't think the current copyright system is a good way, well, we aren't obligated to keep them in their current form. So if we say, okay, this isn't working, we don't have reporters in major cities, in a Cleveland, in a Pittsburgh, we don't have reporters that are covering what their city council is doing, what their mayors and other local officials are doing, that's a real problem. So copyright isn't accomplishing what we set it out to do, which means we should be looking to alternatives. And if those alternatives mean that the companies that have thrived on the copyright system aren't doing very well, that's too bad. I mean, that's all I could say. I mean, we don't have an obligation to make sure that the Los Angeles Times makes money in its current form. We don't have an obligation to do that. And I understand they'll be unhappy and they'll fight it. I get that. I get the politics. But in terms of, is there, some moral, ethical obligation to make sure the LA Times could make money in its current form? No.
It appears your work on intellectual property rights when it comes to vaccine and your views on the media and this tax credit voucher system are somewhat related, have a clear connection.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's, one of the things, this has really been true for me as long as I've been in economics, that I think it's important to think of how you structure the market. So a lot of people tend to think of the market as just given to us by nature. And, I don't know how many times I've encountered people say, oh, our big problem is the market. And my response is no, the problem is how we structured the market, which doesn't mean we want the market to do everything. But the point is, the market, to my view, could be structured pretty much an infinite number of ways. It's infinitely malleable. So the question is, where do we have structures in the market that lead to outcomes we clearly don't like? I mean, in some ways we might like it. Well, I do like a lot of the outcomes of the market. I can go get a sweater I like, well, that's a great thing. I can go to the store and, no one's going to tell me what sweater I should get. I'll get the one that I think I love. It looks good on me. Maybe I have bad taste. That could be, but in any case, that's my taste. No one else is going to tell me. So that's the case the market does real well. It doesn't do well in producing prescription drugs. It doesn't do well in supporting a viable media. And that's a case where we then have to look and say, okay, can we structure the market differently? And, again, the intellectual property, this is something, again, it just amazes me how little attention this gets, not just as like, oh, we want people to have good health or, we need the media, but literally the amount of money involved. I mean, I did some calculations a couple of years ago, and we could plausibly say that we redistribute over $1 trillion a year. That's about 5% of the U.S. economy, about half of all corporate profits, before tax corporate profits, to the holders of intellectual property rights from everyone else. It's a huge, huge amount of money. And it's just not given a lot. It doesn't get anywhere near the attention it deserves. I'll just put it that way. So it's a huge issue. And, yeah, I've spent time on it. I wish I could have spent more time on it, and I really do think people need to look at intellectual property issues more closely.